coming, as Martin said, especially on a Monday evening. It's not ideal weather either, so it's good to see you here. So the presentation, as alluded to, really, is going to be about the work I did over the summertime and the master's degree placement, which I did at UHI, as Martin said. The placement itself was hosted by UHI and Orca, as well as a sort of combination thing. And I was supervised by Martin, who's at the Cairns, and Nick Card at the Ness of Brodgar. And so a special thanks to them for letting me loose on their sites and getting up to all sorts of shenanigans. So the presentation is going to involve some of the 3D content that I created. And to do this, I made basically several video grabs of the laptop of me manipulating the 3D models, so that you can sort of see video screenshots. And the capture software is okay, but it's a little bit jerky. The frame rate's not great, but you get to see the models, and they are also all available to see on the Sketchfab site. So that's sketchfab.com/Jim Bright. You can see some links and things online to that. Okay. So I'm going to sort of begin with just briefly discussing what exactly photogrammetry is, because I mean there's different terms bandied about these days, and photogrammetry gets bandied about quite a lot, and there is actually quite a few different different meanings to the term photogrammetry, which sort of changed and evolved over the years. So if you look at the Oxford English Dictionary, it's basically really basic. It just says the use of photogrammetry, or the use of photography for survey. What does that mean? Well, what I'm doing is I'm using what's called structure from motion photogrammetry. And you can see the definition there: a photogrammetric method of creating three-dimensional models of a feature or topography from overlapping two-dimensional photographs taken from many locations and orientations to reconstruct the photographed scene. So that kind of bit of mouthful, but it kind of sort of melds in and makes a bit of sense there. So, I'm going to quick background as to why I started doing the placement in the first place. And this kind of all started when I was doing my undergraduate work. Again, this was with UHI. And I wrote a dissertation on sort of looking at the value of 3D models in archaeology. And 3D models were starting to pop up. You know, they just started to come out, and people were starting to see things. Sketchfab is a fairly new website. And, you know, they were starting to pop up in the heritage industry. The British Museum were maybe making a few. And I kind of wanted to find out what people actually made of them, you know, what was the value in making them and the time it took to actually make them, and then trying to find out, you know, what are they used for, you know, is there a sort of, is this technique going to be used in the future, or is it just a sort of faddy thing, you know, you'll see it for a little bit and then people will just get bored with it after they've seen the sort of wow factor of a 3D model. So I wanted to sort of find out what would happen after the novelty wore off and what people really thought. So I went to the Buckingham District Fishing Heritage Centre, that's down in Murray between Inverness and Aberdeen, and asked us to create some 3D models of some heritage items, and you know, to see what people really thought of them. And then what I did, I made some online surveys with all these models in, and then disseminated 2 different surveys out, one to archaeologists or professional archaeologists, and one to the general public. And that was really, you know, just to sort of find out. I had quite a few different questions. I won't go into too much tonight, but again, it was just trying to get some information about, you know, what these things are doing. And you know, I made, for example, a 3D model here. This is a block and tackle pulley 3D model which I made, which, you know, is a really basic, sort of fairly mundane item, but were people going to be wowed by it just because it's a 3D model, or you know, would anyone really get anything for that? You know, they're fairly simple things. To be honest, the background's terrible. I don't use that background anymore because it's a bit blurry. It doesn't do much for the models. So moved on.
How many photos is that, Jim?
That one now, I can't quite remember. Now it was good 3 years ago. I did it 2-3 years ago. I think it's probably around 50 to 70 photographs. I think, but I can tell you for sure if I look it up. But yeah, not that many. But, yeah, I mean, and this is interesting. This is the drifter scraping knife, fishing equipment. This is interesting for a number of reasons. See, it doesn't look great. Models are a bit funny, a bit bumpy, slightly bumpy in places. And this is actually quite important. And this is I actually put this into the survey to find out. So if you look at the top 2 images of that 3D model, you know, you can see it. As I said, it's quite bumpy, there's holes there, and when you compare it to an actual photograph, oh, what have you done? Excuse me. The actual photograph of the knife, you can see it's quite smooth, so there's differences there. And when I put this out, I didn't mention this at all in the surveys. And you still got people coming back, and archaeologists were a bit more critical, but even so, the general public as well, either thought the model was good or very good. And I even got some of the comments in the surveys coming back to me saying, well, it's interesting to see how the knife, maybe it's been melted by being used in an engine room. It was quite, quite bumpy. So that really demonstrated to me the importance of making sure you have a really accurate, good quality model, because it actually could sort of, it could cause confusion, it could cause misinterpretation of an artifact. So that's quite an important thing I found. So what I learned from that. Okay, so learned that from the surveys that there's a lot of interest from the archaeologists survey and the general public. You can see there that the public learned. 67% of people said they actually learned something from the models in the public, general public, and 59 people there learned something from the. 59% of archaeologists learned something again from the 3D models. The archaeologists again is an overwhelmingly positive response, asking if they have used 3D models before or if they plan to in the future. And as you can see, exactly 49% said that they would use them in the future. 49% said they already have done and would use them in the future, and there's only 2% of people said they weren't interested. So, there was definitely going to be some potential in the future for these things, and it looked like the novelty wasn't been aware of. There were many other questions I asked and got a lot of research and data back, but you get the general gist of what I got up to there. So that takes us into the master's placement. So I finished the dissertation, I had the results. But I wanted to further develop the role of archaeology, or photogrammetry and archaeology for my placement. So creating 3D models of archaeological sites, it's not a new idea, it's been done. Did some research, but we just go to Sketchfab, do a search. There's loads of 3D models that are being made now from various heritage places all over the world. There's an awful lot being done with that. It's just a quick screen grab there, but I wanted to develop the skills in photogrammetry and the digital techniques sort of taken to archaeology and how they're being used there. But also I wanted to see what's the value of having an on-site digital archaeologist throughout the entire season, every day during the excavation, because there's some interesting questions you can ask there about what would happen and what would come up. And it's not something that's really normally being done, just at the moment anyway. So after discussions with Martin and with Nick Card, so I was offered the opportunity to work throughout both the seasons at the Ness of Brodgar and the Cairns. I would be able to sort of make some 3D models of trenches and structures and things like that using different phases of the excavation, which is another key thing I'll come on to a little bit later on. But I could develop the skills in creating models of the small finds of things that were coming up while I was actually there as well. And the idea there was basically that I could make some 3D models just as they've been excavated. So as soon as a small find comes out, I can do a 3D model of it, and by the evening that can go out to the general public and they can see in 3D some of the things that are being coming up during the actual day of the excavation. Also, that would some of the things are actually being photographed in situ before they actually get lifted up. So again, get some 3D models of things in their context before they get lifted. So that was, you're going to see how that worked out, and would that add some value to having someone there on site throughout the excavation. So, using the software, and the main tools I really used for this is basically throughout the whole place, both Ness and the Cairns. I used a standard Nikon D60 digital SLR camera to take photographs, and I used a bit of software called Agisoft PhotoScan. There are other software available, but Agisoft is kind of the key one that people are using at the moment, especially in the heritage sector. That's kind of the way it's going at the moment. Now, I'm aware there's been previous talks about how photogrammetry is made and things like that, but for people that don't know, I thought I'll give a quick overview of actually how I make these things for those that don't know. So, firstly, I photograph all the way around a model or an area to be modelled. This is the pin from the Cairns, or well, we don't know if it's a pin, it's a potential pin. That was we found at the Cairns, and I made a model of it in situ. You can see that all the photographs there, I've basically taken all the way around. There weren't that many photos of that one. That's a quick sort of, I've cropped that, but there were a few more. It's once you've sort of taken all the photographs, you can pop them into the software, and then you use what's called a masking tool, which then you can sort of cut out parts of the photograph that you don't want the software to use, to interpret the order. So if you've got a bit of blurry background or a blurry area, you can then cut that out with each photograph, and then the software won't try and process that, and you won't get a bad model, you get a better model for it. So once you've done that, then you can start the alignment process, which is it's called a base point cloud. That's basically where the software takes millions and millions of points in each photograph, and then works out the positions in each photograph from everyone, and then compares them to basically identify the position and the angle in which you took each photograph. And then once it's done that, you can sort of work out where you were for each photograph. You can see the squares there, and then it generates what's called a base point cloud. So it's a few little points, like pixels, sort of making up your 3D model. And that's very basic. So once you've done that, then you need to look at the potential errors and things that come out from that, because there's going to be problems. First of all, there's going to be bad data. It doesn't matter how good your photos are going to be, there's always going to be some bad data, and the software does have various things. Again, I won't bore you with too much detail of these, because I could go on forever, but you can basically play around with the settings, work out things like reconstruction, uncertainty, and projection errors, which takes out all the bad points, or the points it thinks aren't quite right, and once it's deleted those, then you've got a clearer point cloud. Once that's done, you go ahead and you make your dense point cloud. You can see here, this is the pin, this is a point cloud, just loads and loads of points, again, like pixels I suppose, but in 3D. And if you zoom right in the bottom image there, you can see it zoom right in, you can see all the points that have been made. So that's not the final model, because then you have to create a mesh. So once the mesh is done, you basically trim around the dense point cloud and then run this sort of wireframe mesh generation. It's essentially where all the points are joined up, and it makes things called vertices or faces. And you can see them there, and that's just a wireframe sort of mesh, which will sort of go around the point cloud. It sort of works out various things. It's basically like joining the dots, I suppose, if you want to put it really basically. The problem with that is, you have to be quite careful when choosing the quality of generation and things like this, because if you make a dense point cloud and it's got several million points in it, then when you go ahead and start generating the mesh, it can run out, it doesn't matter how powerful your computer is, it will run out of memory, because there's just too many for it to work with. So you have to work out the right amount of points you want to generate, and then the right amount of faces or vertices in the mesh as well. And again, I found after a while that generating too many faces, normally I aim for 1 or 2 million faces, which these are the triangles. Anything more than that, if you don't put him out on Sketchfab, it's going to crash people's devices. And indeed, there was a trench that I made for the cairns of the trench, and I put it up on Sketchfab. And it's fine on my fairly powerful laptop, which is an Orkney's own laptop, but it started crashing people's computers because it's just too difficult for it to load. So you have to try, and it's really a balance of getting a good quality model with, trying to sort of get it as low, a lower face count as possible, lower points, dense point count as possible. You have to sort of play around with that, and that depends on what you're modelling, where you're doing it, all sorts of things. But again, it's a bit of a learning curve. Anyway, let's move on. This is a pin model. This is a final model after the texture's been wrapped around the mesh. So the texture file is made up of basically all the photos that you took, and then wraps it around the mesh, which has been created from the dense point cloud, if that sort of makes sense. And you can see here, this is an in situ pin. The good thing about this is, if it did fall apart when it was being lifted, then we've got an accurate record of it in situ, which again was already demonstrating the value of having someone there every day on the site. When I was working at the Ness, again, there was a really, really large piece of Neolithic pot. I'm sure Anne will remember all worrying about lifting, and I made a 3D model of that, so we had it complete in situ. just in case it fell apart. Luckily it didn't, it came out and all was well, but we've got that record and we've got it in context. So, you know, again, it kind of goes to show that, you know, it is useful being there. Here's just a model of one of the larger trenches. This is Trench M. So I was making a few of these. This is one of the early phased ones that I did. It's pretty basic. I only took a few photographs and the frame rate's not great there, but I was quite pleased with the results nonetheless. I only recently processed the data for this one, but this is one of the ones earlier on in the season. You know, and the more these get used, I mean, you know, the future for comparing and contrasting with ones made in previous years to see how the site's progressed and things like that, is, you know, could be quite useful as well. I think that will really start adding to the record in the future. I also wanted to see what shell deposits were like, or any sort of hidden deposits. So I made a model of this cluster of shells at the cairns. This may come in useful in future projects, and I will touch on this a bit later on. But I thought it'd be interesting to make a 3D model that can then be viewed later on by specialists to maybe work out, you know, potential structure deposition and things like that. You know, you don't know what you're going to see, and once it's all gone, it's gone. But you've got the record of it in 3D to then sort of work out angles, and you know, you can maybe get some more information in the future. But I will go into that a bit more in a bit. I also created some small finds at the cairns after they were excavated, and to do this I used a light box in the little shed at the back, or the porter cabin. This is my little setup here. There's a light box there, the laptop and the camera, and then you basically just take photographs, rotating the object inside the light box all the way around it to create a 3D model of some of the small finds that came out. And I was there quite a lot. And here's one of the cow tooth. I was basically just sat at the back of the finds shed, and as things came in, I was just trying to get as many photographs as I could to get models of things as they were coming in. It was all good practice. Okay, so souterrain in structure F. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to get 3D models during different phases of the excavation. And you know, the cairns really offered me the first opportunity to do this. There's some deposits of bone being removed from the souterrain. And then, as you can see in the bottom images here, I made 3 different models during different phases. There's one on the 23rd, one on the 29th, and I did a few more as well. This one's on in the 4th of July. There are a few more as well. But I wanted to see, you know, what the value of having 3D models of the same area being done during the phases of excavation as bones are being removed. And you can see here, this is the model of the souterrain made on the 23rd of June. See some of the bones there. It's quite difficult getting the string. Can confuse it all if it moves around a lot. So it's quite lucky to get that model to come out. But you get to see the model there, and I'll show you one of them. But I'll show you one that's taken on the 29th where that bone had been removed, and we're onto a different layer. So you've got the trench or the souterrain in 3D in different phases of excavation. It's a few blurry bits there. This is early off when I was starting off doing this, so as my skills got better, the models got better. But you get an idea of what I was trying to do. So after that, I was at the Ness. I wanted to take this further, and there was a wall in structure 1, later phase wall in structure 1 of the Ness. So after discussion with Nick and the structure supervisor, I decided that I was going to undertake photogrammetry, because it was going to get removed. I was going to take photographs and make models at each course the wall being removed in each section. So we would have models of it going down bit by bit. It actually proved really successful. The fact that it was digitally recorded was quite interesting to the public. People came out and it got lots of views. People were seeing this thing as it was being removed in 3D in the comfort of their own home. That's always good, and people that from abroad can see it. It's proved really good. More importantly, for my research as well, proved useful for the supervisor of Structure 1. They come over to me on quite a few occasions and said, Jim, have you got that model of the wall that you did 3 days ago? Because there's a stone here we've got, which has got some incised stuff on it, and we want to find out where it was in the wall. And they do plan these things, like plan drawings and things, but it was much easier just to put up a 3D model from a few days ago, look around it, and then say, oh, there it was, and you spot it in a few seconds. So that proved really, really good, and you can see that it was being really useful already. And you can see here this quick video clip here of me. This was filmed by Simon Gray. Some of you may have gone to his talk in the summertime. He filmed throughout the Ness of Brodgar and made a series of video diaries, and this was a quick clip of one of his video diaries so you can get an idea of what I was up to on the wall. Now, I played this earlier on this machine, and it was a bit jerky and it was a bit funny, so I apologise for the poor quality. That's not Simon's doing, that's my doing, embedding it into a PowerPoint, so blame me, not Simon. The full video diaries, they're all up on the Ness of Brodgar website, so go and check them out if you're interested.
So part of the recording process where we get to this wall in Structure 1, it's already being planned, and what Jim's doing now is creating a 3D model using photogrammetry. He's just going around the wall and taking loads of different shots of the structure. A meticulous process, Jim, isn't it?
It really has to be, yeah, and to get a really nice detailed model, to get normally about 300 photographs all the way around the wall, and then I'll take those photographs, put them into software to generate a 3D model. And the idea is really to do that in different phases of excavation of the wall, so we'll have multiple really detailed 3D models of the wall coming out, and you can go back and reference them and be useful for the site record.
Yeah, different stages as well. You mentioned to me earlier when you can take, once we've got say 20% of the wall down, we can then do the same again and have a look at what the first 3 or 4 crucial courses of walling might look like.
So that can be useful for old students for the reason that if you want to go back, or the site director wants to go back and see how it was at a particular phase of excavation, that can really add to the record. You've got some really nice 3D detailed models of the same structure in different phases. So
it will be so sharp that you'll have loads of nice and sized Neolithic art showing up. Is that right?
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Hopefully I can get some of that too.
I thought I'd bring this video to an end just by having a quick look at Jim's model of the wall in Structure 1 that he's been working on. You can see already the detail is quite fine. There are actually a few enhancements, believe it or not, that need to be made and a few adjustments before this is definitely finished, but we'll put a link up at the end of the video so you can have a quick look at that yourself a bit later on. This kind of technology is fantastic because, of course, archaeology is a destructive process. So we can add this to our written record and our photographic record and look back reflectively at something which in this case, of course, won't be there. And we'll keep you informed of the progress that Structure 1 and the team are making with this project over the course of the season. So keep an eye out for the next video, and once again, thanks for watching.
So thanks to Simon for that one. And now you get to see the actual, this is a wall, this is the beginning of the excavation when it was all complete. And I made a 3D model of that. So you can see it's quite a substantial thing. And then this is a wall at the end of the excavation, the final day, where it's been removed. So you can see now the wall down there, and the 3 author stacks are now completely clear of anything. And there's a tiny bit left down this side, but it's nearly all gone. And we have a record of that as each course has gone, so there's quite a few models done in different sections. So this is proving to be quite an effective way of recording. Okay, so another development of the work was use of coded targets. This came on a bit later on in the season. There was a geomatics officer on site. I was able to record 3D coordinates of the models when I was at the Ness of Brodgar. And it's actually something I learned from some of you know Hugo and Wymark, who told me about this. Not only did he tell me about it, he actually kindly printed me out hundreds of these coded targets, which are really useful. They're basically placed around the area to be modelled, and then PhotoScan can identify each one slightly different, so it knows which one is which. And then the position of each one is recorded using a total station and the coordinates they've taken. And then once I've got all that information, basically you input that into the PhotoScan software with all the XYZ coordinates of each target. And what that does is actually lets you perform measurements of the 3D model down to the nearest millimetre. So it's really, really powerful stuff. And you can see here the use of the ruler tool. This is the structure 8. And this is PhotoScan software with all the coordinates input. So just that's 69.3 centimetres. So that's pretty powerful stuff when you can start measuring a 3D model down to the nearest millimetre after the fact, after it's all been removed. You've still got that record. It actually proved so useful that the site director Nick decided to use some of the areas of the models instead of traditional planning of the sites, which I'll show you in a minute.
How many photos is that then, Jim?
Structure rate, I think that was about 500. I think that was around 500. I'm not sure. I have to tell you. I took so many photos, my memories are blank. I'll show you the statistics at the end of how many I took overall. There's a lot. So, as I say, that's what I did with structure 26. This is a really large, complex structure. It was excavated by the site supervisors, Mike and Claire Copper. Again, as some of you will know. The area was huge, and it would have taken days probably to actually do really detailed plans. And Nick said, well, you know, we've got this new software, we've got new technology, you know, why not do a 3D model of it and use coded targets to create accurate measurements and things like that, which I did. And this is a model of one of the models of the structure 26. Again, I did this a few times throughout the excavation, and you can see how detailed or how complex that structure is. Again, you can see these online in better quality than the screen grabbed version, but you get an idea of what went on there. That was actually quite hard to get a model of as well, because you have to sort of really tiptoe around the stones to make sure you get detail underneath the stones and make sure you get everything. Otherwise,
so if you're measuring a stone, does it take into account the angle that you're viewing it at?
Yep.
So,
yeah, it's XYZ coordinates, so it's completely 3D. So you can do that indeed. So, on to the smart fauna. What's a smart fauna? Well, it's a project that was work that's been undertaken for a while now by animal bone specialist Ingrid Mainland. Is basically interested in how certain bones have been deposited in a central midden area at the Ness. The work basically has been involved recording the location of each end of each animal bone deposit from the entire midden area. There's a lot. There are so many of them. There's the geomatics officer just constantly just going out and recording the ends of each bone. Each time a section is ready, they come along and do this hundreds of times to record the locations and the XYZ coordinates of each bone. So, to add to this, I thought in the 2017 season, I'd come along and do photogrammetry again of this area. And that would basically be, useful for the future for Ingrid and other animal bone specialists to look at the deposit back in the office and look around it and look at the 3D model and see the bones as they were in situ while the smart fauna was going on, and then combining that with data that was taken from there. I had to make sure that obviously the bones are really detailed and the model was really detailed, and it's quite an unusual sort of area. It's like a big wall almost. You have to be really careful when you're taking the models. You have to get all the angles of every bone, and make sure you're getting all the photos, because of course if you're not going to take, if there's an angle of the bone you haven't taken a photograph from, it's not going to work in the model. So I ended up doing all sorts of really interesting yoga moves to try and sort of go around and get photographs of all the bones, and I had backache for quite a while after that, but I think it was worth it. You can see one of the models here, the smart fauna project. The archaeologists that are working on this as well have the painstaking task of basically going around and chipping away, well not chipping away, but dusting away and being really careful to clean away all the debris from the bones before they're then recorded, and that takes hours as well. Just about see some of the bones sticking out from the wall there. Get your measurements of the bone again. So hopefully in the future, Ingrid will be able, or again another animal bone specialist, will then be able to look at this and identify some of the bones that are in this deposit. So what have I learned from the 3D models during the excavation? Well, firstly, dissemination to the public. It was adding an important extra layer to an excavation season and to the blogs and the diaries and things that go out when when these excavations are going on. People could basically see the trenches up close and personal, as it were, when they're at home, looking at the blogs, and they can zoom in and see what's going on the site. So that was quite nice to be able to contribute something extra to both the caves and the Ness. I think maybe going next to a slightly different layer of something that people hadn't maybe seen before certainly throughout a dig site during the actual season itself. And also the models were creating a record of the site. That can be viewed in future, and like I said before, can be compared and contrasted with other models from previous years, so there's that ongoing thing, and then you're going to have a lovely record in a few years' time of all these different models, and you can see how the site's built up and changed over that time, and what's come out of that. There are replacing difficult planning, as I said. That's one thing that's I think really fundamental throughout my place. The fact that Nick had decided to actually use some of these models instead of traditionally planning certain areas, and that really showed off the potential of this and being on site. And the structure supervisors found this really useful too. They were actually, by the end of the season, I was making the 3D models for them. They were asking me to print out screen grabs at certain angles of the 3D models to then give back to them while they're working on the site to help them inform them what they were going to do next, and they could draw on them and sort of work out where they were going, and then they'll go do their thing, do a bit more excavation. I'll do another model, come back to me, and I have another screen grab of this new model, and it really starts informing the structure supervisors and becomes a really useful tool for them, and that was quite a big change. Problems and solutions. Well, there are a few that became apparent during the work, especially the popularity of the models and the requirement for the models became greater. So, the time to create the models was quite a big issue. Taking the photos themselves wouldn't take that long, it would maybe take about 10-15 minutes, maybe a bit longer with the smartphone and stuff, but not that long really. But then it's actually the processing of the model on the laptop. I mean, that could take like 2 to 6 hours, depending on how complex it was. And of course, with that, you've then got to work out, well, if the archaeologists aren't having to wait before they can go back in and excavate to make sure the models are going to come out. Because if they went back in and carried on working and the model didn't come out and the model had been made for planning purposes, you're going to have a problem. So I had to try and work out the best way of rendering the model fairly fast. So I knew that it was at least going to work, and then get a really basics of the model, and then in the evenings I'd then go ahead and redo that and try and get a better quality model. One way of doing it, it's just the nature of the beast, but it's still faster than the planning. Another issue is more than one area ended up wanting photogrammetry at the same time. As the Ness started building up and building up, more structure supervisors wanting the 3D models and needing the 3D models. So I had to be in several places at once, quite a lot, yeah, by the end of it, I was sort of, can you do structure 8, can you do structure 26? We've got the smart formula ready for you. We've got another course of the wall coming down, you know, structure 1, and the poor laptop was just whirring away all the time, you know, so I think something to be learned from that, you know, in the future would be more than one laptop for a start. It's a very powerful laptop, but you're going to need more than one more, maybe even more than one person working on the site doing this sort of work. The weather was the other problem. Now shadows cast when the sun comes out isn't great. It can confuse a model. Also, what was even worse, of course, is Orkney being Orkney. It'd be a perfectly sunny day. I'd go out, start to do a 3D model of the wall, and then it'd start raining halfway through. So you have like one half that's wet, one half that's dry. There's problems like that. So again, it's just the nature of working on Orkney. It's quite a good place to practice photogrammetry because you're going to encounter these issues quite a lot and sort of build up workarounds for that. And there are problems with the small finds as well sometimes. One issue with image-based photogrammetry is it's very difficult to make a decent 3D model of very, very small finds. And it's also quite hard to make a 3D model of anything reflective because reflections can confuse the software as well. A good example was when I tried to make a 3D model of this wonderful glass bead that came up at the caves. Funnily enough, I was making a 3D model of what's termed the red cell at the caves, and I was cleaning up the area, making it all nice, went in, did the 3D model, everything was fine, went home, processed it, everything fine. Next day, I found out that Kevin, the Caves small find specialist, they looked at the red cell and found that sitting right where I was making the 3D model, and I completely missed it. It was so small that I completely missed this thing. But I wanted to try and get a 3D model of that at least if I could. But doesn't really work. So generated the point cloud, and it just made this bizarre cubic mess. Really, it was too small and it was too reflective, and no matter how much I tried, and I had another photographer on site as well, and we were trying various things with his macro lens, and we just couldn't get anything really from it. So it was either I reprocessed that a few times, it either ended up as a cube or a big line or all sorts of things. So unfortunately, the end result was something that looked like it was going to attack the enterprise anyway. That's just the way it is. I mean, things are moving on, so hopefully in the future we may get somewhere. So, collections. There's a nice little feature of Sketchfab that lets you make online 3D collections of your work. This is where I uploaded all the stuff for dissemination, so you can see it's actually quite helpful when you're making the collection smart formula to have it all in one batch, and the wall all in one batch. And I think that's that's really quite useful. So I could sort of add and even now I'm still adding things to these collections as I'm making bits of the data that I haven't got around to before. So the collections thing is really quite useful, and again they're all up for people to see if they want to. Nearly there. But just want to touch on what else I actually learned from all this. So I learned quite a lot from the time there, both the caves and the Ness. I learned it was very cheap when you're comparing it to 3D laser scanning or something like that. I mean, the software, the pro software, I think I could be wrong, but I think it's about £3,000 or £4,000. The standard version is about £70,000 to get the coordinates and the coding targets and everything you need the pro version. This is obviously Orca's pay that, not me. But it's cheap when you compare laser scanning, which is about 20 grand for a bit of kit. I'm just using a camera going around. There are free alternatives to photoscan as well, which are coming into their own. So it could be even cheaper soon. As I've said before, it's fast when you're comparing it to sketch planning. If you're going to sketch plan that entire area of structure 26, I got the model done by a few hours time as opposed to days of planning. But it is a skill you need to learn, and over the time I spent both at the caves and the Ness, I started building up the skill sets. In order to get really good 3D quality, really good quality 3D models, you need a decent skill set, because anyone can go and just take lots of photographs, but if you're not quite knowing the angle, not thinking about the lighting and the weather and the reflections and everything else, you're going to get a 3D model maybe, but it's to get really good detail, you do need to build up a skill set, I think. So after speaking to some of the commercial archaeologists on the site of the Ness, it did turn out they are starting to do this now in commercial archaeology more and more. I think it's going to take off in coming years. I mean, this is going to replace a lot of things. Now that's quite controversial. Some people don't like the idea of that. There are many reasons to see why that is. We'll go into that maybe another discussion, but it is going to take off and it isn't going anywhere, this software, this technique. I also learned that I really needed to plan and organise my models. I ended up making sheets and sheets and sheets of each section of the wall, for example, or each structure. Had to work out how to do a sketch plan of it, a very, very, very basic sketch plan to go over the Orca site records. I then had to make sure it was uploaded to Sketchfab, make sure all the coordinates are taken from the geomatics officer and all put in correctly. There's all sorts of things you have to do for each model, and when you're getting loads of them coming in at once, when you're getting the laptop wearing away, and you have to go out and do more photogrammetry while that's doing this, and you need to be really, really organised. And again, I think these techniques, they probably will become sort of a structured, standard thing that everyone does. But at the moment, everyone's doing their own thing because it's kind of a new technology. Well, not a new technology, but using it in archaeology, like I've been doing here, is kind of a new thing. Stats jam. So, after you asked me how many photos I took, overall, I took over 136 gigabytes worth of data. So that's over 20,000 photographs in total I took, which nearly blew the laptop up. It's still working, it's still quite good, but yeah, it's a lot of work. And again, it kind of highlights in the future you're going to want more powerful machines, maybe more than one. Storage space was an issue. I was constantly running out of storage space and having to move things over. That needs to be considered, and again, how these things are stored in the future. And there's a whole debate about, what to do with digital forms of recording, because what's going to happen when they come out of date in the future. So there's all that side of it as well. Anyway, just to finish off, I want to give a special thanks, as Martin said at the very beginning, Daphne Lauren Fund Bursary Award that I got, which had I not got that, I honestly would not have been able to come over to Orkney and do the master's degree. So very special thanks for that, and thanks to Martin and to Nick for allowing me, as I say, to dig about and mess about with technology on their sites and see what we could come up with. Scott Timothy is my supervisor, who helped me throughout the report, and I had to do my big report at the end of the placement. And Hugo, who again, he gave me so many hints and tips on best practices and what settings to use on Sketchfab and what settings to use in Photoscan, but he was an enormous help as well. And finally, I really couldn't resist making a 3D model of Ness Big Dog Breed. So I walked past him in the